The warrior's path is not an easy path, but it is worthwhile. Through power, love, and wisdom, the warrior seeks meaning and truth. Let's enter the path. Let's talk about shoulders. Shoulders can be a lovely part of the physique. We also recognize their ability to hold a lot of weight and can push with a great deal of force. Because of this, many metaphors have abounded about shouldering burdens and shouldering through a tough situation. I got to thinking a lot about my own shoulders when I was in yoga teacher training. Before that, I had avoided working on particular poses, such as wheel, because I found it difficult to do. Some people I noticed could bring themselves up into wheel with very little problem, but I just couldn't seem to do it. My struggle with wheel led me to question if there was more to explore about shoulders, what they can tell us not only about our body, but about ourselves. A few weeks back, I made a video about the relationship between the physical poses done in yoga and the mental and emotional aspects of a person. And therefore, working on the body through yoga can provide opportunities to rebalance, open up, or energize one or more of those aspects. As a reminder, I discuss the heart as an energy center that exemplifies love, compassion, and forgiveness, linking with the inflexibility we might experience in the thoracic area of our spine. But can it go in the reverse direction? In other words, can a physical, shall we call it limitation, be a symptom of a mental, emotional, or spiritual blockage or limitation as well? To explore this question, let's first examine the word yoga. Yoga literally means yoke. A yoke bridges and binds something together. In the traditional sense, we might think of farm animals yoked together, and their combined strength allows for greater levels of work to be done, such as in plowing a field. Likewise, yoga bridges the physical with the mental, emotional, and even spiritual aspects of ourselves, allowing work to be done in a particular area of our life. So, if this linkage is true, it stands to reason that one could identify some mental or emotional area that needs, for lack of a better word, improvement, and then work on it through some sort of body mechanics. For example, someone might feel a lack of confidence and personal power and might choose to work with yoga poses that bring heat and activity to the solar plexus chakra. Remember, this was also discussed in the first video about energy centers. So the solar plexus chakra addresses those areas of our life: bravery, willpower, confidence, forming relationships in groups, communities, and the wider world. Doing poses such as cat and cow, boat, bow, and seated twist can help to build, strengthen, and balance that energy center. Also, to address the solar plexus chakra from a mental aspect, we can perform studies such as reading books, listening to lectures, or going to workshops to inform our minds of the building blocks of confidence. We could decide to take a public speaking course, go to a rally, volunteer, or do any number of things that work on building confidence and empowerment. In this way, we can address the issue of feeling disempowered by a multi-pronged approach: physically with yoga or other body work, mentally with studies regarding the underpinnings of disempowerment, and emotionally with activities and inner work that positively strengthen our sense of empowerment. Swinging back around to shoulders, I'd like to share my exploration that started with recognizing I had shoulder issues and ended with a lesson about personal integrity. Common sayings we hear about shoulders are, "He has the weight of the world on his shoulders," or he has a real chip on his shoulder. In a more positive sense, one gives a shoulder to lean on. These sayings recognize that the type of energy that resides within the shoulder area is the stuff of support and responsibility. We can look at responsibility as having a yin aspect and a yang, reminding ourselves that yin is more receptive and yang more active. Taking the yang side of responsibility, what does active responsibility look like? Words that came to me are agreements, commitments, and obligations. Examples might be, you agree to work for a company, so you show up and do your job. Examples of commitment could be marriage, having a child, or providing care and support to someone you love. An obligation, which means a formal promise, might be paying your mortgage or taxes, or serving a term in the military. If we were going to place a label on the entire concept of the yang side of responsibility, we might call it our contracts. The yin aspect of responsibility lies in the condition of receiving or perceiving this responsibility. What does that look like? Opportunity. Does that sound crazy? Well, we might be getting ahead of ourselves by saying something as preposterous as contract and opportunity are like two sides of the responsibility coin. So let's take apart the contract side of responsibility to make some more sense out of this. When I started looking more deeply at the idea of contracts, two resources that I've studied in the past rapidly came to the forefront. The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz and Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Myss. The Four Agreements is a marvelous book that dissects the most basic idea that we first learn about growing up. It has been called many things, but the most easily identifiable name for it in Western culture is the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. This basic idea of fairness and granting others their own beingness is echoed worldwide in the vast array of cultures, religions, and philosophies that we humans have. It seems to be a basic precept of our very existence within society and is the basis of the Four Agreements. Don Miguel shares the Toltec wisdom of the Golden Rule in 4 principles, which are each a pillar or leg of this. The first agreement, be impeccable with your word, like all of the agreements, is huge. Words generate belief. Belief generates action. Action brings forth consequences. If you tell yourself that you are ugly, stupid, or lazy, these resonant sounds will carry into your mental and physical world. Likewise, we can create a non-optimal outward reality using mean words. And by mean, I don't just refer to mean as in nasty, vicious, or vile language, although that is a part of the idea. But also, mean words are those that deny our divine nature, creating a state of feeling unworthy or unexalted. And if we are going to invoke the Golden Rule, then we wouldn't use mean words on others as well as we wouldn't use them on ourselves. In a culture where outrageous and contemptible language is commonly used for our quote-unquote entertainment, reminding ourselves that being impeccable with our words should be a daily mantra. Mean what you say what you mean. Marshall Rosenberg, psychologist and the author of Nonviolent Communication, suggests there are 2 ways of communicating, which he calls giraffe and jackal language. Giraffe, because it has to pump blood all the way up its long neck to its head, has the largest heart of all land mammals. Therefore, when he references giraffe communication, that means using your heart as a filter of love, compassion, and understanding. Jackal communication is based on fear and anger, lashing out and tearing down. Dr. Rosenberg discusses seeing others with giraffe eyes, listening with giraffe ears, and speaking through giraffe heart. An excellent comparison if ever there was one. So being impeccable with our word, saying what we mean and meaning what we say, should always first be run through the filter of giraffe, using the power of our words in the direction of love and truth. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. Let's take the example of a person. Let's call her Kate, who is having problems with her boss, say Dolores. It seems that everything Kate does is put under the microscope, so to speak, by Dolores. The presentation Kate is asked to create and has worked countless hours on is completely torn apart by Dolores, with not one good comment. Multiple projects are micromanaged with grueling oversight and unrealistic timelines. When Kate's team travels with Dolores to an out-of-town meeting with a customer, Kate forgets her business cards. Let's say she was distracted by a situation at home, which left her scrambling to get out of the door in time. She writes her contact info on the back of a colleague's card to give to the customer. Dolores dresses her down in front of the team on the drive back to the airport. During the wait for their flight, they have dinner, and Kate ends up seated next to Dolores and feels forced to socialize with her. The very last thing in the world she feels like doing. Kate is beginning to feel the crush of this harassment, and finally goes to HR. There she discovers that Dolores has been placing all of these warnings in her file. Kate is furious and feels betrayed. She begins seeking other positions in her company and finally gets a lateral move. Once no longer under the thumb of this person, she is able to observe Dolores' behavior from a more dispassionate viewpoint. The behavior that caused Kate such distress was now being focused on a new employee who eventually got fired when a large account was lost. Kate realized Dolores' behavior wasn't personal. That Dolores, in Marshall Rosenberg language, was exhibiting jackal behavior. Dolores had such deep insecurities that she had to control others and assign blame to protect herself. Kate, with giraffe eyes, was able to see that Dolores had some deep personal issues that was causing her to behave in such a deplorable manner. Kate has been able to carry this lesson forward, to recognize that people often act from their own personal dramas, and that it has little to do with her. Because of that, she has been able to look with giraffe eyes at her work, social, and family interactions. It was a big lesson for Kate, and can be for all of us. Don't make assumptions is the third agreement. Before a diplomat goes to represent his or her country elsewhere, they need to learn how to behave. A culture's history, religion, and traditions can vary immensely. For instance, bowing as a greeting instead of handshaking. In the same manner, each person is like a country. They have their own history, family traditions and ways of communicating, and viewpoints based on their own set of experiences. So when someone says or does something that could be interpreted poorly, the idea here is not to make an assumption, and instead ask them why they did what they did or why they said what they said, clarifying for better understanding instead of assuming the worst. In a popular business book from a number of years back, there was a memorable story the author told about a businessman traveling on a train. He was trying to get some work done but was distracted by these children running up and down the aisle, stomping and talking loudly, and generally being disruptive. With mounting annoyance, this businessman tried to ignore the commotion. He noticed their father just sitting there, letting them run wild. Finally, when the businessman could no longer take it, he impatiently went up and confronted the man about his unruly children, saying something like, "Good God, man, can't you control your children? They're bothering all of us on the train with their running and shouting." The father, who had been staring off into space, slowly raised his eyes to the businessman and replied, "I'm so sorry they've been bothering you, sir. They are generally very well behaved. But you see, they just lost their mother to cancer, and I guess they don't know how to cope with the loss." Ashamed, the businessman apologized for his short temper and wished the man well. His paradigm, his understanding of their behavior had changed with the knowledge of that family's recent experience. We certainly wouldn't want others to make assumptions about us without understanding what drives our behavior. In a similar manner, we should golden rule it, creating an environment of understanding and compassion instead of jumping to conclusions about someone. The final principle of the Golden Rule, as outlined in the 4 agreements, is always do your best. In school, did you feel guilty when you received a C, when you knew that you could have gotten a B or even an A? You weren't living up to your potential, and you were denying yourself the full benefit of your education. A while ago, my son had asked me if he could use my car to take his friends somewhere. I agreed, on the condition that he would clean my car afterward as a thank you. Holding him to that promise, I gave him the cleaning supplies and off he went. The next day I was dismayed to see big streaks on my dashboard and other signs of his hurried, half-hearted attempt. How did that make me feel? Like I wasn't important enough for his best attempt. That my generosity wasn't appreciated. Flipping it around, I started looking at the byproducts of my life and what that said about me. Do I go the full length? Do I do my best at every turn? For example, when preparing a meal for my family, do I do my best? Is the meal nutritious and good tasting? Or is it done in a hurried fashion, distracted and impatient to get it out of the way? If someone were preparing a meal for us, would we want them to wash their hands before beginning? Tasting it to make sure it was seasoned properly? Serving it warm and cooked correctly? Yes to all of those, right? This example, while mundane, can lead us to look at other areas of our life that could well be addressed by this principle of always doing our best. So studying the 4 agreements fleshes out the yang side of responsibility, addressing how we can act to fulfill the contractual side of our lives, the one we made when we incarnated, to live by the golden rule of treating others how we would want to be treated. There are other contracts besides the agreement to live by the golden rule, but I think we made a good start. Now let's talk about the yin side of responsibility, the receiving or perceiving side. In the book Sacred Contracts, intuitive healer, lecturer, and author Carolyn Myss discusses finding out what our sacred contracts were that we made before we incarnated, what we agreed to do. As she says, did we decide that this time we wanted to understand more about creating and so chose to be an artist or an engineer? Did we want to explore compassion and giving of the self, such as Mother Teresa did? Or diving into the concept of causing change in a nonviolent way, such as Gandhi? Or providing inspiration, as Helen Keller did? Myss does a wonderful job in her video lecture, but a more thorough understanding would be to read her book. It is all about perceiving what our contracts are. Once our sacred contracts are identified and understood, we can see that the real triumph of the yin aspect of responsibility is finding or perceiving the opportunity for uncovering our dharma or purpose, opportunity to recognize our full potential, opportunity to move through the spiral of life, finding the call points for meeting what we have contracted to do, opportunity for living a richer more fulfilled life. But what can we do right now, sitting here? As suggested in the 4 agreements, as we incorporate the livingness of those 4 pillars in small incremental ways, we begin to live a life filled with more integrity. I find that integrity arises from the solar plexus area. As we work with that energy, building confidence and personal power, integrity and honor are the natural outcomes. The throat center takes that integrity and provides the outward expression of it through our life contracts, which will naturally show up in the many facets of our life. The heart energy sitting in between those two informs through love and compassion. So we see the energy bubbling around in these 3 spaces: the power center housing integrity, the heart shaping with love, and the throat expressing the personal truth, and the shoulders being the conduits for the working of the hands, where we give and receive in life, both physically and metaphorically. We can see that the shoulders are at the crossroads for the flow of energy and takes the shape of what we might call responsibility. And when we are out of harmony with our life path, dealing with unwanted contracts, the energy gets stuck there. We can begin to stir that blocked energy that we hold in our shoulders. Just like a stuffy nose, when we first treat it with a cough drop, it takes a while for the menthol to unblock the nasal passages. But little by little it does its job. Living in the integrity of right thought and right action acts like menthol for our shoulders. In addition, we can begin to explore what our sacred contracts might be. A good place to start is asking, what gives me my greatest joy? Or, in quiet moments, where do my thoughts tend to go? Another good place to explore is looking at the opposite. In other words, what might not be your contract, but perhaps has been told to you is your contract from family, community, school, and other groups. You can also ask, what would I like to release? Looking for those things that bring no joy and merely feel like a burden. Along with this line of questioning, you can begin to do some simple shoulder openers to begin to release the flow, both physically and energetically. Like the menthol in the cough drop, you can do this right now. Accessing the range of motion, you can start with seated side stretch, reaching up and over to one side and then the other. This is a modification of gate pose and reverse warrior. Next, you can grab the back of your chair and lean forward. This gets into your pectorals and deltoid muscles, which tend to tighten up. This is modified from the yin shoulder opener. Another useful pose is modified from puppy pose, where you use the back of your chair to get a deep stretch. And one last suggestion is seated eagle. The full expression would be to be done standing, but to get the stretch in the upper back, you can just cross your arms and give yourself a hug. I have found that doing these poses and reflecting on the questions, such as, where do I find my greatest joy? What responsibilities do I readily accept? And what responsibilities would I like to release? Have helped me to move in the direction of increased integrity and, no surprise, more flexible shoulders. So nearing the end of this video, I still haven't explained why I gave it this name. What's up with that? Well, as the concept of shoulders and contracts and integrity were coming together for this video, I had a very clear picture of my spirit guide, Dragon. Dragon not only protects me, but helps me access the energy of my solar plexus energy center. He is the one who showed me that blocked flow in shoulders is a result of unfulfilled contracts, as well as allowing contracts to be placed upon oneself that do not belong. And it is through working first in the power center and then the love center that we can begin to mentholate our shoulders and bring forth our truth from the throat center, opening up the doors to a richer, more effective life. Have a good day.